Yep. So yeah, I will be starting my presentation, and today I will be presenting a paper titled "PlayWorld: Learning Robot Models from Autonomous Play." And a bit of an overview on this paper. Um, this paper was published very recently in Archive 2026, and from authors from Princeton University. And here in the slides, I included some links to the project page and the code. And you can maybe see some more interactive videos in the project page. And a bit of disclaimer that the credits for all the images, figures, and tables belong to the original authors. And yeah, I think the basic introduction to this work is that recently in robot learning, there has been a lot of new paradigm of using action conditioned video models, which is basically fine-tuning video generation models together with robotics datasets. And these have shown quite good results in long horizon planning and, for example, policy evaluation. But one problem that remains is that these video models are still very vulnerable to hallucinations, especially when you try to simulate more contact-rich interactions or dynamic interactions. And the existing models are typically trained using human collected demonstrations. And the core hypothesis behind this paper is that by using human bias demonstrations, this leads to systematic bias and also poor coverage of the interaction dynamics. So the core motivation behind this is that how can we obtain the most useful data for learning high quality world models? And the core insight is that robot world models should be trained using autonomous play data. And as we will show in the paper, is that by using autonomous play data, we will get one is that more broad coverage of diverse contact events, and it also allows for more efficient and diverse scaling with very minimal supervision. And so a little bit of background on the related work. So what is autonomous play data in robotics? So play data, it refers to unstructured and task agnostic robot interactions. And these typically cover very broad range of behaviors compared to maybe narrow expert demonstrations. And recently there has been some papers that try to use play data for training world models, especially for policy improvement. But as mentioned previously, these still rely on either human collected play data, for example, via teleop, or for example, some kind of supervised policy rollout. And while these are quite useful for training models, this limits the scalability and also the broad interaction diversity that might be needed to get more generalizable dynamics. So the question is that how can we acquire play data autonomously and also have quite diverse interaction data inside of the data? And yeah, going to the second part is that, as mentioned, recently there's been a lot of trends in robotics to use world models. And in this paper, world modeling can be formalized as learning generalizable dynamics under distributional mismatch. And what this means is that you would like to train an action condition model that remains accurate predictions beyond the actual distribution of the training. And in robotics, video world models have been recently used for trajectory generation, policy evaluation, and also policy improvement. But these either use expert demonstrations, which is biased to human success, they use manual rollouts, which is supervised by humans, or maybe use offline data sets. And it makes it hard to achieve a very broad and diverse state action coverage, which is needed to get general dynamics. So the question here is that how can we actually train role models that have more generalizable and diverse dynamics? So to solve those two different problems, this paper called PlayWorld uh, proposes a framework that trains action condition video models to be able to predict diverse contact dynamics with fine-grained precision. And the key uh, core part of this paper is that to be able to learn accurate world models, you would require broad unstructured interaction data from autonomous play. So these frameworks will have two main different parts, which is one is the autonomous data generation system, and the next is that how do we actually learn and improve the policies using the generate data. So here, I think the core part of the paper is how do we actually get autonomous robot play data collection? Specifically, how do we design a policy play that is not only reliable but can also run autonomously to collect play data? And the paper mentions that there's kind of three different requirements. One is that it needs to engage in very diverse interaction so that it has a very meaningful and broad coverage of data. Another one, it has to be very reliable to prevent and recover from failures, because we want the most minimal human supervision when collecting this data. And another one is that it should be able to kind of work on diverse language instructions and also objects without requiring any kind of manual engineering. And how do we kind of achieve this three design requirements is by using a VLM task proposer combined with a VLA to execute the task. And yeah, a bit more detail about that. So the system design basically has three different core parts. One is the task proposer. The second part is the task executor that executes the task that is proposed. Another one is the safety filter and resets to be able to constrain the data collection and supervise it without any human supervision. So for the task proposer, what they do is they have a VLM, observe the current scene, and then generate a natural language task for the robot. And there's, for example, here on the right side, there are the prompts that are used to generate the natural language tasks. And they introduce small variations in the instruction. And this is because they want to increase the diversity of the tasks, but still keep the task executable within the distribution. And this creates task level exploration without needing to hand design anything in the training phase. And then once you generate these task proposals, you have a VLA policy that executes the language instruction produced by the VLM. And one key part is here that small changes in the instruction and the wording can actually produce different robot behaviors for VLAs. And this is actually leveraged in PlayWorld so that we can get more diverse contact dynamics under different object configurations. And then finally, to be able to run autonomously very, very long without any kind of human oversight or supervision, they include safety filters and resets. So one is that you need to enforce the robot to stay in in like a specific workspace with joint limits. And also they also use the VLM to detect whenever the object is out of reach or maybe, for example, out of the scene. And then the VLA itself will perform the scene reset. And this allows kind of the system to uh, autonomously run by itself, even by overnight runs, for example. So this is quite a simple design, but I think it's quite useful to generate diverse data, which we will show in the results. And the next part is then once we have this data generation system, how do we actually learn uh, dynamics and also world models using this data? So here they have the architecture and the training method for the video model. And I think in the paper, they don't really do any specific architectural changes or anything. So they mostly relied on prior work where they use a stable video diffusion as the backbone for the world model. And this is initialized from a large scale robot data and then fine tuned on the PlayWorld data. And they also use multi-view observation. So they have three different cameras and joint prediction on these different views. And the training is not only for common motions, but also targeted for more contact-rich interaction dynamics. And the next important part about this is instead of learning from the data in a naive manner, they implement a kind of curriculum learning method. And this is because when you use play data, especially one generated by the system, it still contains many easy or maybe repetitive transitions and maybe a fewer rare diverse interactions. So there is quite a data imbalance there. So what they do is they implement a simple curriculum by ranking the play samples by the distance to the successful demonstrations. So what this means is that the training will start with more success like samples, successful demonstrations, and then once the training is progressing, it will gradually shift toward more harder exploratory ones. And this improves learning of the contact dynamics to be more generalizable. So with this kind of play data system and also role model training, there's quite five research questions that would like to kind of test in the experiments. One is that does the play data system actually induce more diverse interactions compared to human teleop data? And the second part is does the data generated actually improve the video prediction accuracy compared to the human collected data? And then finally, does this kind of play world system, does it actually unlock uh, better capabilities of the role models? For example, does it enable fine-grained policy evaluation? Does it enable you to fine-tune the policy through role model rollout instead of a real-world RL? And finally, does it actually improve the accuracy and generalization when you scale the data even more compared to human collected data? And as the baseline here, because the core part of the paper is about data, they compared to two types of data collection, namely teleoperation data collection as the baseline. One is human demo, which is basically task-specific expert demonstrations collected by a human. And this is very similar to the typical demonstration fine-tuning paradigm in robot learning. And then the second is instead of having an autonomous play, they ask a human to generate the play data by a human operator. And yeah, they kind of interact in a task agnostic manner. So this is a video of the play data collection. So in total they collected around 30 hours of task agnostic autonomous play data. Then they do this across three different object sets. As you can see here, for example, they have common objects like bowl, carrot, and polar bear. And then, for example, a stack and unstack task of rectangular block cube. And finally, also a more deformable object such as towel, and the task is to fold and unfold the towel. So yeah, going back to the results, to the initial research questions, the first question is, does PlayWorld actually induce more diverse interactions? So what they do here is to show through some visualization of the embedding space of the training samples. And they show here, for example, if you notice the circles, uh, they have a more broad behavioral coverage. So, for example, here in this embedding space, there's a lot more circles spread out compared to the different, compared to triangle and square. And this shows that the robot play data actually has a more broader behavioral coverage than human collected trajectories. So, yes, it does induce more diverse interactions. And the next one is that does the PlayWorld actually predict contact dynamics? So how they do this is that they create interaction-centric benchmark, which has six different behavior modes, which is success, misgrasp, slide, slip, deformation, and collision. And they try to see if the role model trained on this PlayWorld data can actually have better prediction for the dynamic interactions. And basically, in this table, what it shows is that for successful interactions, the prediction quality is quite similar for the different kinds of data collection. But when you use PlayWorld, it actually is much better for either dynamic interactions like failure data, like deformation or slip or slide. And also one good point is that the curriculum learning that we explained earlier is that it actually is much better in improving the prediction quality compared to naively training on the entire data without the curriculum. And this shows here, for example, some kind of images. For example, here it shows that PlayWorld is very close to ground truth image, while the baseline actually has more unrealistic physics. And the most common failure rate here is the baselines like to hallucinate success, while the PlayWorld actually can actually predict failures compared to the baseline models. And here, for example, can PlayWorld actually predict performance of different policies in the real world? So here, for example, they have the correlation between real and world models, and they do this by training different policies and then simulate and different simulation and real world experiments. And the basic takeaway here is that when you use the play world prediction, it actually very closely matches the real world success rates and also the distribution of the outcome. And meanwhile, if you use baseline models like baseline data collection methods, it only captures a very narrow set of failure modes. And interestingly, when you use human play data, it actually has the worst performance because when you have diversity that is out of distribution, it actually hurts the performance of the prediction. And here it also shows, for example, because baseline models have underrepresented interactions, it actually regresses to more familiar outcomes or like unrestricted dynamics. So, for example, it might predict uh, when a task fails, it might actually predict and hallucinate that it succeeds. So this is what causes the large gap between the predicted and the real success rate. And here, for example, the next question is, can actually the world model be used for policy fine-tuning? So I think the key result here that can be showed here is that um, when you fine-tune the world model using the play world, you fine-tune the policy using the play world model, it shows that um, uh, there's actually much better performance compared to like the baseline world models. And the key implication here is that once you have a good enough accurate world model that is has like a very generalizable dynamics, it can actually support in-model RL fine-tuning, and this makes RL much more practical than running RL directly on real robots. And I think the final part here is that the core question here is that when you scale the data to increasing amounts, does the play world actually perform good? And also, does it actually generalize to different objects? So on the left side here, as you can see here, when you scale the number of hours of data, the human demo and the human play, they in addition to performing worse than the play world, they also the increase is also very steady. But when you use play world, for example, once you scale the play data set to even bigger data sets, the increase is much more higher. And this shows that scaling the data actually makes the play world much better. And similarly, when you increase the diversity of the object, it's able to kind of predict unseen objects more accurately because it learns the shared interaction patterns between the different objects. And I think this is a key, high-level summary and takeaway from this paper is that I think when you use PlayWorld, it shows that large-scale interaction-rich play data is actually a more promising and scalable source for learning video world models. And while scaling the data is important, what we showed is that having the diversity and coverage of the data is actually as important as the scale. So especially when you want to cover different interactions and failure modes. And I think here, one interesting part is that real-world data is usually still more effective than simulation or human video. But because teleoperation is very costly and also often lacks diversity, by using this kind of autonomous large-scale play data generation, it makes increasing the scaling much more better. And this is actually complementary to teleop because once the base models become better and better, the autonomous play data should also improve because we also use a VLA in the framework. So I think the key next step in the future work is how to kind of unify the play and the policy learning because right now the step between these two are different. And this should combine like robust exploration and low data regime with consistent policy improvement over time. And this might answer the question of how we can continually collect data and also improve policy in a closed loop manner and achieving test time robot learning. And yeah, I think that concludes my presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. And does anyone have a question or comment on the presentation?
I have a question.
Yes.
Maybe you mentioned in one of the slide, but what is the sampling efficiency from the generated data? So, for
Mhm.
example, I imagine not all the generated data are usable.
I
Or,
see what you mean.
yeah.
I think so your question is, for example, if they have like the generic data, do they do any kind of filtering or sampling before they train it? Is that your question, for example?
Yes.
I think based on the paper, it's actually that they don't really do any filtering. They just use the data that is collected because, for example, the failures and the different out of distribution uh, interactions actually help learning better dynamics. But I think the core part is that when you use just you use naively the data, all of them together, without any kind of curriculum, it actually is much worse than using a curriculum. So I think in terms of sampling, they actually instead of like actually filtering the data, they just make a curriculum where the order of the data that you learn from is more important than sampling or like reducing the data. If that answers your question. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Uh,
And that kind of leads to another question, just very quick.
Yep.
How do they decide the curriculum?
Oh yeah, so I think sorry, maybe I didn't explain it a bit at a bit, but for example, how they decide the curriculum is that they start with more of the successful tasks, like the successful examples, and then once you uh proceed with the training, it gradually shifts to like the more harder tasks, like the failures and for example auto distribution, and they use like like latent space distance to kind of determine this. So the further it is to the successful demonstration, it should be in the further curriculum part, for example.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.
I have
I
a question, but so please go ahead.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a quick question. I think this is kind of it can be explained in the mechanism of distillation in some way, and I think the word model's performance is capped by the performance of VLA. So
Yes.
I have two questions. What kind of VLA does it use, and does the paper mentioned about the kind of performance of VLA?
Yeah, I think for the VLA they don't really mention the performance, but I think for the VLA itself, from my understanding, they use for example pi 0.5. And I think what they say in the paper is that because you restrict the tasks to like a workspace and also you have the resets, the VLA performance is actually quite good. So I think in general, but I think it's a good point that the quality of the data is actually also restricted to the VLE policy. So that's why I mentioned that once the VLE gets better, then the autonomous data is going to get better as well. So I think it will be kind of a closed loop in the future if we use this kind of system.
Okay, I see. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Maybe time is running up, but I do have one simple question.
Mhm.
It's very similar to the prior question, but does it show the trained model outperforms the VLA used for getting the play data?
So the question is that the final policy that is trained actually outperforms the VLA. Is that correct?
Yeah, that it is to correct the data.
I see. So I think
Or they show the kind of a generalization over the task used for the play.
I think I didn't see any direct comparison between
Okay.
like the PLE and the role model, because I think their point is that they want to use the data to have more accurate role models instead of like improving the performance. But
Mhm.
maybe I missed it in paper, but I will check it and maybe let you know about it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, simple question. Okay, so maybe time is running up, so let's close today's session.